Moving back into a haunted room and it is already not going well. If you've been here a long time, then you know that I have been experiencing paranormal activity in my home for a while, and I do believe that it came from one of the stories that I read on here that had some stuff attached to it. I had some really weird stuff happen afterwards that I'll get into later. But more recently, I have felt like there is just something there. I thought it was my nerves, but I don't feel it all the time, which is really weird. And not so long ago, I made a video about how I was painting the basement, and all of a sudden I got this super overwhelming sense of someone looking at me through the slits of this utility door that I have. So much so that I stopped painting and I just went upstairs because something weird happened right after that. And by weird, I mean the radio just randomly turned on with white noise. I shouldn't even say white noise, static. So I went upstairs, didn't go down there for a while. Everything was cool, everything was dandy. And this is pretty common with the activity that happens here, where it'll ramp up and it'll scare me a little bit, and then it'll just like kind of smooth out again just as I'm comfortable enough to like actually go back down there by myself. Anyways, 2 days ago, I'm finally like in the home stretch of these renovations where I'm turning the guest room, that is also where the most activity happens, into my office where I can do content creation. I plan on doing YouTube videos and podcasts and things like that in there. And I don't know if this is like the worst decision of my life or what. I have a boombox from the 90s. It is my mom's from college, and I was cleaning out their basement when I found it, and I just took it for my own. It's important to note that this particular boombox has been sitting in my guest closet for I don't even know how long, like a while. The boombox itself has been in my family's possession since they were made. I want to say I dug it out of my parents' basement and took it into my own space. Probably less than a year ago. It's been untouched, unused for I don't know how long. Nobody's powered it on in years. Well, my Bluetooth speaker is like dead, and I was like, oh, how fun would it be to listen to the radio? So I dig this thing out, I plug it in on the carpet because I have absolutely no furniture down there. I'm waiting on a bunch of stuff to arrive so I can like set it up. I am home alone. There is no one else here. My dogs aren't even with me in the basement. I power it on, I click the radio portion of it, and immediately it is static, obviously. Another very important piece is at the top of the basement stairs, I have a doggy gate because I just don't like my dogs being in the basement by themselves. They're very mischievous. I have 3 Bostons, and that at this point in time is closed. And at this point, I am like knelt down super close to my boombox so I can see what the screen says because I'm not wearing my glasses. My back is facing the door, and I hear what sounds like someone sprinting down the stairs. Like, bah, 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 bah. Someone is hauling ass down the stairs. It scares me so bad that I like turn around and I'm like, Baba, because I thought it was my dog. No one's there. The light's on. And I was like, okay, I knew exactly what had happened, and I immediately shut the door. And I ended up telling my boyfriend when he got home from work because I was so freaked out. If you've been here for a very long time, then you know that this activity has been ramping up, and he has actually had his own experiences with this entity itself. And he immediately believed me. He immediately was like, are you sure you want to film videos on there? And I still doubled down and I was like, yeah, I need the space. So, and I'm hoping with a little cleansing, a little prayer, a little pizzazz, it'll just not bother me the way that it has in the past, but who knows? But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
If you guys have toys around you right now, you might want to go to the other room to listen to this story. Don't say I didn't warn you. So this guy says that the story he's about to say may make you guys think that he's crazy or you may not believe him, but everything that he's about to tell us is real. This happened 27 years ago when he was 5 years old and really close to turning 6. Him and his brother always kept their toys in this really big toy chest, and he explains how his older brother used to always conserve those toys, and he was the troublemaker that would go and break them. As a kid, he was a scaredy cat, but he was also very sensitive to the paranormal, and anytime that he would see something, he would go tell his parents, his grandmother, his uncles, and nobody would believe him. They always told him that he would make up all these stories, and he would insist that he wouldn't, and even now that he's an adult, he still sees some things. He explains how he didn't like watching scary movies when he was a kid because then he would have trouble going to sleep, but his older brother loved scary movies, so he had to pretend to be brave for his brother. Around that time, they didn't have like cable or anything like that, so the scary movies that they would watch would always be on this like channel 5 on a box TV. So whatever was playing is what they would watch. So he remembers that it was a Saturday and they were showing scary movies back to back, and he was able to watch The Children of the Corn and Pet Sematary, but he explains that those type of movies weren't the ones that would scare him. So the last movie that they played on this Saturday was about cursed toys or like possessed toys. He says he doesn't really remember the name of that movie. So this movie that he was watching about like possessed toys and cursed toys, this movie was the only one that actually made him think to himself, because he stayed with that curiosity of like, can these toys be possessed? Can they come to life? Like, can they be cursed? Can toys move when you're not watching them? Like, he truly couldn't stop thinking about it, because he's like, what would I do if my toys out of nowhere just got up and started moving? So by this point, the days have passed, and of course he had already forgotten about that movie and the toys and all of that. One random day, him and his brother were in the grandmother's room, because that's where they kept a really big chest full of toys, and they were in there playing with everything. He remembers that both of him and his brother were in that room playing with the toys when they heard their grandmother scream for them, because the mom had just gotten home from work and she wanted them to say hi to her. So of course they both went downstairs, they said hi to their mom, but he remembers that he was so excited to continue on playing that he told his brother, hey, let's go back up there and keep playing with the toys. But the brother tells him, oh, you go first, I'm gonna do something and then I'll come right after. So in that moment, as he's walking up those stairs, he said that randomly that movie popped into his head again, and again he started thinking to himself, can the toys move when you're not watching them? Can they become possessed? And all of that. He started walking very silently up those steps. He said that he pretended like he was a cat. He wanted to move very slowly, very quietly. He remembers very clearly that the door to the grandmother's bedroom where their toys were in was closed, and that the door where you put a key in, it was a really old door where like if the key's not there, you can see through the little hole. He got really curious and decided that before he even walked in there, he was gonna look through that little keyhole to see if any of the dolls were moving. When he looks in there, he sees that there are 2 dolls just standing by themselves. The dolls were moving on their own. He said that they were moving in such a way that he just couldn't believe it. They almost looked like they were very robotic. He's like, it was obvious that they had to move that way because one of the dolls was just a rag doll and the other one was plastic, where it didn't have that little area where the joints could move. He's like, I don't know how long I stood there looking through the peephole watching these dolls move, but I felt like I was hypnotized, just like watching it, and I couldn't believe that these dolls were moving. He said that the weird thing was that they were moving in such a strange way, and that was because the rag doll, it didn't have like a flat feet to where it could walk. Sometimes that little rag doll would fall over and then she would pick herself up again. And the other doll, the one with the flat feet, it would walk like if it had a limp, like very robotic, like of course it couldn't bend its knees. Those movements, obviously he couldn't believe watching that these dolls are moving, but there was one fucked up move that happened that terrified him. Till this day, when he thinks about it, it scares him so much. The plastic doll, the one that had the flat feet, out of nowhere started spinning her head like The Exorcist. She would rotate it all the way around. Sometimes she would stop and go the other direction. He's like, I am 32 years old. I've seen a Nahual close by. I've seen a ball of fire, which were witches, but nothing has provoked enough fear in me the way this doll spinning her head did. Like he said, he didn't know how long he had been outside that door, but when he saw that head rotate and is finally when he reacted, he literally ran downstairs. He said he must have hit only 2 steps. He flew down there and straight to his parents, where his grandma was, where his brother was, and tells them that the dolls are moving by themselves in the grandmother's bedroom. And of course, nobody believed him. In that moment, when all the adults didn't believe him, he looks at his older brother and he tells them, I promise you, I just saw the dolls move. I'm not making this up. Please believe me. He remembers begging his brother. He's like, please, I promise on God that I'm not making this up. Please believe me. He doesn't know if maybe the brother actually believed him or if he said this because he wanted to calm him down a little bit, but the brother's like, okay, let's go and check. As they're walking up the stairs, he's turning to his brother and saying, you need to be very quiet. We need to move really silently. They cannot hear us. And the brother agreed. They made it to the grandmother's door. The older brother peeked in through that little hole, and he also sees those dolls moving on their own. So now both of them were looking through this hole, like taking turns. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Now he doesn't know if one of them made a noise or a step or whatever, but something made a sound, and as they're looking at these dolls, when the sound was made, they just dropped in the position, in the area that they had both left them at when they went down there to say hi to their mom when she got home from work. And he's like, of course, I know what you're thinking. These were like the movements from the movie Toy Story. Whenever the dolls would be like, Andy's coming, it was exactly like that. He's like, I know it sounds crazy. I know you're not gonna believe me, but just so you know, this happened in 1993, before the movie Toy Story had even came out. He said that they stayed very still, they stayed very quiet, and after like a minute, these dolls got up again. They were both looking at them, trying to get up, because it wasn't like an easy task for them to get up. So the older brother at this point was like, fuck it, I'm gonna open up that door. And when he did, he freaking flew that door wide open, and these dolls dropped the same way they had done in the first time, like when Andy's coming, and they just drop in that position. That's what happened in front of their faces when the older brother just opened up that door. I would have died of a heart attack, because what the fuck, why is this happening? Imagine watching that movie and then your dolls come to life. Maybe those dolls were already alive before you watched that movie. He said how his brother grabbed those dolls and put them as far down into that chest that they could, putting all the other toys into the chest above them. This time the brother went down there, told his family that he also saw them moving, and again, they didn't believe either of them. So these dolls belong to their mom, and she still has them till this day. These dolls mean a lot to their mom because she had a really hard childhood and they were very poor, and these were the only toys that she had that her mom, their grandmother, had gotten for her. So the plastic doll, the one that had the flat feet, it was the kind of dolls where when you lay her down, she can close her eyes, and when you stand her up, she opens them up. He explains how the weirdest shit was that only one of her eyes stopped working. So when you would lay her down, only one eye would close, and when you would sit her up, only one eye would open, leaving the other one opened at all times. So the reason why he's mentioning this is because when they both saw these dolls moving, both of their eyes were working, because he could see where this doll would blink, like almost like if she was actually looking out of her eyes. He goes on to say that he knows that people are not going to believe his story, but he just wants to reassure you that it's real. But if there is a takeaway that you can at the very least have from this story, is that you should believe your kids when they tell you that they see something. He says, please believe them when they're giving you the details of what they saw, and please be reassured that kids are more susceptible to seeing the paranormal. So if anything, if you have any takeaway from this story, is to please believe your kids. He's also very curious to know if anybody else has seen something like this, because he's like, there's no way that it was just me and my brother who has seen something as fucking creepy and scary as this. But what do you guys think?
I think ghost stories involving children always feel the more eerie, don't they? Because, childhood is something we associate with, innocence, playfulness, and then suddenly when it crosses the boundaries into, the paranormal, it becomes a bit more frightening, doesn't it, and sinister. I suppose it's in the same way that, clowns go hand in hand. There's something that was previously happy and innocent, but there's something like off about it when it's a darker aspect of something paranormal, when it's previously from something innocent. So that in mind, the following story I was told a little while back now, but it happened in Liverpool in the 1960s. So it was during a period in which, families didn't have much money, and this one mother wanted to become a piano teacher. She had a passion for music. It was just her and her daughter and her son. So she goes away for the weekend to visit her parents and asks her sister if she can come and tune the piano, because her sister is also a piano player. So naturally she agrees to help her sister out, and lo and behold, she goes over one Sunday, lets herself into the house, and starts playing the piano and trying to find out the correct tunes, etc. Now, partway into this, she distinctly feels like a little hand brushing against her ankles, and she thinks at first, oh, is it a spider? Or darts down, looks, there's nothing there. Playing away again, she notices now as she's in the room, she can actually see her breath, whereas before she couldn't. The temperature has significantly dropped. So, carrying on playing, brushes it off, bit of a shiver. She feels distinctly a small little hand stroking her cheek like this, and then playing with her hair, like twiddling it round their finger, spiraling it. And looks, and to the side, she just seen a small child's hand that looked feminine with a little frilled sleeve around it, but nothing above the elbow. It was just there. So of course she screams, jumps up into the air. The hand's now vanished, and as she goes to run out of the room, there's the apparition of a solid looking child now, so the full body's there, of this little girl. She's got a doll, a porcelain doll in one hand, holding the doll by the hand, so like holding it up. And she's like sooty, she looks a bit dirty, and the child just looks back at her. She said it felt like they were there for hours, when in matter of fact it couldn't have been more than 10-20 seconds. But she said then she got, mustered up the courage to say to the child, like, are you okay? Like, who are you? And apparently the little girl just did a giggle, ran into the hallway, and as she poked her head through the door to follow her, where the hallway stopped, the child ran straight through the wall and was gone. So, she had to, for the sake of her sister, carry on tuning that piano, and of course couldn't tell a single mother on her own with 2 children of this ghostly experience she'd had in the house. Now fast forward 6 months or so, her sister never mentions any hauntings, but her nephew did. So the little nephew comes to stay at the auntie's house, and he says to her, Auntie Chloe, what happens when you die? And she thought, oh, that's an unusual question, but, I'll answer his question. It's a curious child's brain. And she, goes on to tell him, well, we go, this is a Christian family. We go on to a better place. We join our relatives that have gone before us, etc. And he says, well, how come little Diana's just in the house by herself? She's not with her family, and she died in World War II. And this is a 7-year-old child that's saying this. So she's completely taken aback and instantly thinks that ghost has been communicating with him as well. So she has no choice in the end but to confide in his mother and about all the experiences. And, safe to say, when she built up the money from her piano lessons, she moved house, because while she might have never encountered the ghost herself for whatever reason, her little boy was, and it was communicating with him. Now, that's sort of a comfort in a way to know that, the ghost is not lonely, it's communicating with other children. But at the same time, would you feel comfortable with a ghostly child talking about death with your 7-year-old? I don't think I would, folks. Let me know what you make of this ghastly tale.
I got an email from a girl who said that she went to the Appalachian Mountains with her cousin and some other people and experienced a mimicking her cousin while her cousin was there, and this thing was just terrorizing them. So we're going to call this girl Scarlett for the story. So this happened to Scarlett 3 years ago. One day, Scarlett and her cousins decide that they want to go on a trip together. Now, they grew up in the city, so they are around noise, streetlights, people everywhere. So when her and her 2 cousins got the chance to spend a week at her grandparents' cabin in the Appalachian Mountains, they were beyond excited. They imagined hiking, campfires, late night talks, finally seeing the wilderness instead of concrete. This cabin was very deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It was hours away from the nearest town. The cabin belonged to their grandmother and their grandfather before they passed, and her grandmother was always peaceful there, but she did say that before she left, she reminded her of some rules. And like I said, her grandmother was a very positive lady, but when she was giving her these rules, these set of rules, she was not smiling. She said, do not look through the windows at night, do not follow any voices you hear, do not respond to them. If you hear something, no you didn't. If you see something, no you didn't. If you hear a whistle, do not whistle back. Now, as they're driving up to the mountains, they're all in the car together, and they're talking about how their grandmother had told them about these rules, and they're kind of just laughing about it. To them, this kind of just sounded like old mountain superstition, like it was just stories to scare kids. So they finally get there, they settle in, and the first night feels normal. She said that the air was very cold and cleaner than the city, and that she just remembered the trees being so tall that they blocked the sky. So they're just unpacking everything, enjoying themselves. They're talking about how peaceful everything feels. They really like being there. So they hang out for a little bit, right? And then midnight hits, and they're all just chilling in the living room, when all of a sudden they realize something. It seems very quiet. It seems a lot quieter than it normally is. The forest goes completely silent, and before it was making noises of animals, of bugs, of insects, just regular noises that woods make. She said suddenly it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt weird. She felt very uncomfortable. And then they heard it. A whistle coming from outside. So they're all looking at each other like, what the hell is going on? And she looks over at one of her cousins, and her cousin just kind of smirked nervously and was like, it's probably a hiker. Come on. But again, it was midnight, and who would be hiking that late at night? And why whistle like that? Then they start noticing something. The sound is moving. The whistling is circling around the cabin, and it's continuing. It starts to get closer and then further away, and then close again. They're all clearly a little freaked out, but the way that her cousins are coping with it is to kind of joke around a little bit, and one of her cousins actually goes to whistle, and as soon as she does this, Scarlett grabs her arm to stop her. And she says to her, if you remember Nana's rule, if you hear a whistle, don't whistle back. At this point, they're like, you know what, let's just go to sleep. Let's turn off all the lights, go to sleep, forget about this. This is a little freaky. It's a little too freaky for me. Like, let's wait till morning. So they go to sleep, and nothing happens. And the next morning, they wake up, and they convince themselves that this was just kind of like their mind playing tricks on them, or that it was nothing. Maybe it was a hiker. That day they went out to go enjoy the woods. They were taking pictures, they were hiking, they were talking, they were just enjoying the wilderness, and they kind of felt stupid for being scared from the night before. This goes on for the rest of the day. They're really enjoying themselves. They're just walking around. When afternoon comes and they hear something, they hear this screaming sound. Now, this was not just a regular scream. This was a desperate scream coming from deep into the forest. It sounded like somebody was in trouble. They all just stand there and they're just frozen, looking at each other like, what the hell was that? And the scream comes again, but this time it is shorter. And it sounds shorter because it sounds like somebody had their mouth grabbed halfway through. So if someone were to like scream, but it was stopped by someone putting their hand over their mouth, so the end of it being kind of muffled. So one of her cousins decides that she's going to step through the trees, and she's kind of walking towards the sound when she stops, because she, again, remembers one of her Nana's rules, and that is don't follow any voices. So they decide that they're going to go back inside. Well, it's around nighttime at this point, and the night kind of feels heavy. They're a little freaked out at this point. They've experienced a lot. The night before was a lot. They had convinced themselves later in the day that everything was okay. They felt stupid about it, and then this whole screaming thing happened, and now they're back at the house and everything feels heavy. So they're uncomfortable at this point. So they lock all the doors and they turn off most of the lights, and they're just kind of chilling for a while until about 1 a.m. So 1 a.m. hits, and they're all just kind of sitting in the living room when suddenly they hear something. Slow, deliberate footsteps walking around the cabin. You can hear the leaves crunching. Whatever this is moving very carefully. Then they hear a tap, tap, tap right on the window that goes outside. She said it was very soft, but very deliberate. All three of them just turn towards the sound, and then they hear it again. Tap, tap. Scarlett said that every instinct inside of her wanted to open that curtain and see what was there. But again, the rule was clear. Do not look through the windows at night. Now she's thinking to herself, almost every single thing that my Nana has told me not to do, I have experienced at this point. So she is scared, and they are all scared. So they do nothing. They just sit there, and the tapping doesn't happen again. But then they hear it. The whistling again. It was closer than before, and it was directly outside of the house. And then something that would absolutely baffle them, terrify them to their core happened. They hear clear as day, Scarlett, in her cousin's voice, coming from outside while her cousin is sitting right next to her. She said that the voice sounded exactly like her cousin's, same tone, and even had the same nervous laugh at the end that her cousin sometimes gets when she's nervous. So it was literally mocking her and mimicking her. Scarlett's body is just cold. She is terrified, and they all are. And suddenly they hear it again. Scarlett. It's coming from the other side of the cabin. Scarlett wanted to answer. She wanted to scream that they were inside and that it was impossible for this person to be her cousin, because she knew that her cousin was sitting right there. But again, she is still following these rules to a T, and good for her. So they stay silent, and suddenly the window just shatters. Glass explodes inward everywhere, spraying across the floor. So they're all screaming at this point, and they are just backing away, and the night air is just rushing in. It is so cold. All three of them just look away. They refuse to look outside. Whatever this was wanted them desperately to respond in some way, shape, or form, and they were not going to give in to that. And they start hearing this dragging across the wall, this slow scraping sound just dragging across the wall, like nails across the wall. And then all of a sudden everything stops. The whistling stops. The dragging across the wall stops. Everything is completely silent, and somehow they are more terrified by the silence than they are what was happening prior. So they're just waiting, listening. Glass is all over the floor. They're not looking outside. And then after a few minutes they hear this, just this weird breathing right outside the broken window. One of her cousins starts to cry at this point, and she's crying silently, but Scarlett just goes and covers her mouth so that the sound doesn't carry. Then, from the darkness of the hallway, they hear something moving inside of the cabin. Then they hear a floorboard just creak. All Scarlett can think about this entire time is if you hear something, no you didn't. If you see something, no you didn't. Don't follow the voices, just over and over in her head. So they did not move, they did not speak, they did not look. And they hear the floor creak again. And she said that now she could literally hear the steps moving towards them inside of the house. And it just stopped. And then they just sat there all night long until sunrise came. And everything just went silent completely. She said that the next morning that the woods felt completely normal again. The birds were chirping, they could hear insects, everything felt too normal. There was no marks on the walls, they could not see footsteps anywhere. Like, there was no reason for the glass to have shattered like that. They could not find any reason whatsoever. But they all packed in silence and they left immediately. She said that this experience made her feel different about a lot of things, and that she doesn't feel like she is the same person as she was before she went to the Appalachian Mountains. That this unlocked some fear in her that she did not know that she had. And I can completely understand why, because that is terrifying. What do you guys think this was? I mean, this got into the house. That's what scares me. I didn't know that these type of things could get inside of your house. Do you think this was a mimic? Do you think this was something else? Do you think this was like... And I have no idea. This story was terrifying. But I have no time left. I literally have 10 seconds left, so I can't do the outro and I can't do the shout outs. I'm so sorry, but I want your thoughts, opinions, suggestions in the comments. But as always, please be respectful. I love you. Have a spooky night. Keep sending me your scary stories.
In February 1959, 9 hikers lost their lives in the Russian mountains. Welcome to Creepy History, where we discuss stories from the past that are still unsettling today. Today we're going to be talking about Dyatlov Pass. Before I get into this, I just want y'all to know, whenever I'm looking up these history stories or even my Reddit stories, like my scary stories, my podcast, I am researching everything and typing it into a Word document like I'm back in college. Like, I am treating this like an essay that's going to be graded. I even do APA format. So when you see me like reading, it's because I have a terrible memory, okay? Something is seriously wrong with me, and I have a bad memory, so I have to type everything. I have to have everything so organized. Anyway, let's get into the story. On January 23rd, 1959, 10 hikers set out for a winter trek through Russia's Ural Mountains. After several days had passed, one hiker turned around for medical reasons, while the other 9 continued along their route. They had planned to send a message back to their sports club about 3 weeks after taking off. So when the club didn't hear from them by February 20th, a search party began for the 9 hikers. Over the next couple of weeks, the search party found 5 of the hikers' bodies spread out over the snow. They were found in various states of dress and had really bizarre injuries, with one appearing to have bitten off part of his own knuckle. And that same hiker also had burns on his body. Months passed, some of the snow has melted, and investigators discovered the bodies of the remaining 4 hikers who had even more insane injuries. They had been crushed, some head and face injuries, some even had missing parts. When the search party found the tent, it was collapsed and covered in snow. Inside, the hikers' belongings looked pretty much undisturbed. They found hiking boots, clothes, and equipment neatly arranged, and there was even food on a plate as if the hikers were preparing to eat. The tent was slashed open, but the really weird part is, the tent was cut from the inside. What's also really interesting is that they said a few of the hikers had passed from hypothermia, but how the hell does that explain the crazy injuries? What's even crazier is the initial investigation did not determine that a crime had taken place, but rather a compelling natural force. Russian citizens began to wonder if the Soviet government was covering something up, considering that some of the hikers' clothing contained traces of radiation, making them believe that maybe the hikers had passed away in some kind of weapons testing disaster. Since the discovery of the missing 9 hikers, many theories have developed in regards to what really happened to these people. Was it a crazy natural disaster? Were they attacked by humans? Maybe a local tribe? A Yeti? Secret military testing? Who the hell knows? That's what makes this story so creepy. I don't want to sound crazy, but I feel like whatever happened to them that day is way crazier than anything we could ever imagine. I literally cannot even begin to imagine the terror those people felt, no matter what happened to them, and may they rest in peace. That is just so scary and terrible. Well, now we both know the story of Dyatlov Pass. It's actually so much crazier than what I just said. I just did the cliff notes. There's certain things I cannot say on this app. So if you want to know like more of the details, I would go look it up. But knowing what we know now, what do you think happened? Let us know your theories in the comments and let me know what creepy history you want me to talk about next.
A single woman summons a demon and hijinks ensue. Imagine being so tired of dating human men that summoning a demon sounds like the next logical choice. Well, that sets the premise for day 2 of Black Witch Month, which covers I Accidentally Summoned a Demon Boyfriend. Now, this series, called the Accidentally series by Jessica Cage, was the most recommended book that I had. And I saw this being recommended so often that I needed to go and get it. Now, I had no idea what to expect out of this book aside from what was provided on the title. In fact, I didn't actually plan on getting this book at all, but the one I was actually going for, which is I Accidentally Hooked Up with a Vampire, was sold out. So that irritated me, and I was like, okay, well, I guess we'll just get the next best thing, which is I Accidentally Summoned a Demon Boyfriend. And boy, when I tell you, I did not expect some of the steaminess. This book opens up with a bang. We have some booty juice, a bad date gone wrong, a skipped girls' night, which leaves our protagonist here, Miss Raina, who's 36, I believe, going on 37, in a bit of a bad headspace. So after being ditched by her kind of shitty friends, one of them who redeems themselves later, she decides to go home, and she opens this book she was reading, which is how to conjure a love spell or something along those lines. She miraculously has all of the ingredients needed to complete the spell, and she decides on a whim that she's going to do that. And so she does so, and nothing happens, right? It's kind of disappointing. She gets tired of playing around and decides to go take a shower, but lo and behold, after Raina gets out of the shower, she sees something out of the corner of her eye. Now, she's been drinking wine, right? She's gone, okay? It's a matter she was able to finish the shower, but she looks out of the corner of her eye, she sees something there. But this woman is so logical, she is so grounded, and she's like, well, if I look back over there, I expect to see nothing there. But she looks back over there, and there is in fact something there. And within the first 20 pages of this novel, Raina gets booty juice in her car seat, cast a spell, and summons what would be the big dick demon lover that creates the some of the tension in this novel. But I love this book. I think the world building is so beautiful. One of the things I will say is that this is supposed to be a book about demons, and we go to different realms within it, and we learn more about Raina's past, which I want to elaborate more on, so you'll have to forgive me in this instance. But Raina does have some unique heritage, but I can't say too much, and I don't want to give too much away because I do want to inspire people, or at least encourage them to go out and read this book. And if you can't read it, or if you don't have access to it, maybe go to the local library and see if they have it. But I definitely want to encourage people to go and pick this one up. It's a great book. However, at the end of it, our protagonist discovers portions of themselves, or they learn things about themselves that they never knew, and how it links to this universe at large, and how she's connected to this demon that she managed to conjure on a random weekend night after her friend stood her up. But this book is incredible. You have a lot of supernatural creatures, you have demons, you have witches, you have travelers, we'll say, and everything in between. This book here is excellent. One of the things that I enjoyed about it was how Raina, I felt myself in her. Like, I saw a lot of myself in this character. I'm in my 30s, single, dating absolutely sucks at this age. It's better to be single, except unlike Raina, I have half of the capabilities that she does, and the adventures that she goes on through this one very incidental moment of weakness is just so unique. But if you haven't read I Accidentally Summoned a Demon Boyfriend, please do. It's by the author Jessica Cage. A great read, very easy, very entertaining. Out of 5 chilies for spiciness, I give it a very strong 4.2. Again, that was one of the more surprising things. I don't think I thought I would get that in this novel, just picking it up, but definitely give it a try. And if you guys do want more in-depth coverage of this book, I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to give too much away if I can avoid it, because I really do enjoy this book. I would recommend you guys pick it up if you can, and if not, please check your local libraries. But if you haven't checked out Jessica Cage's I Accidentally Summoned a Demon Boyfriend, please do so, and I will see you guys tomorrow on day 3 of Black Witch Month.
That was thin, y'all, because we got another story from someone who claims to have met someone who may not have been human at all. This story comes from someone named Bridget. That's a pseudonym, but she said she's a scientist who's written over 300 papers. And despite this, she still had her fair share of woo-woo stuff happen, but nothing ever like this. So this took place at the Atlanta airport on February 11th, 2026, so very recently. And she was flying through Atlanta to go to Las Vegas because she was going to see the Wizard of Oz at the Sphere. And she said she's not from Atlanta, but she has been to that airport many times. She's flown over 1.5 million miles and knows that airport like the back of her hand because it just seems like she's always flying through Atlanta. She's coming up the escalator on her way to Concourse B. She had to go to gate B18, and she gets off the escalator and she looks to her right and she sees what she described as a gorgeous light-skinned African-American woman with coiled gray hair on top of her head. She was very tall, she was very elegant, but she was walking very, very slowly. And this woman really seems to be struggling to walk. And Bridget says that she also struggles with a tick-borne illness, so she knows what it's like to get tired walking. And so she approaches this woman and she says, "Can I help you get somewhere?" And this woman looks at her and says, "Oh, honey, I must look as bad as I feel." Bridget says, "Oh, no, I didn't mean it like that." She said this woman was gorgeous. She looked maybe European, but she doesn't recall an accent. And they were right outside of B10, and she was going to B18. So she still had a little bit of time. And she's like, "Well, I'll just walk with you. I'll help you. Do you want to take my elbow?" And the woman just taps her on the inside of the arm, and she says, "No, honey, I'm fine." Then it was a Wednesday at about 6:30 p.m. The airport was typically packed with business travel, but she noticed that nobody was touching them as they walked by. And Bridget says that she's been in a wheelchair because of her illness before, and she thought that that was strange because people just tend to push when they get in a hurry. But everybody was kind of making way, and they were walking so slow they were almost shuffling. But after about 10 minutes, the woman looks at her and says, "You know what, honey, I think I could use an orange juice." Coming up to a Starbucks anyway, so Bridget guides her to a seat and says, "You sit here, I'll go get you an orange juice from the coffee shop and I'll be right back." And she said she could still see the woman from where she was standing in the coffee shop after she entered, and she says, "Can I get an orange juice?" And they say, "We only have orange mango." And she goes, "I'm not sure if she's gonna like that. Let me bring it to her and then I'll be right back." Barista kind of gives her a look and she says, "I'm just bringing it to that gorgeous woman sitting right there." And the barista says, "What woman?" And she turns and she looks and she can't see the woman anymore, but she's like, she must just be behind that column. It was no more than 4 long strides from the entrance of the coffee shop to where this woman was sitting. So she goes back over there, doesn't see the woman, and she's looking around this pedestrian-filled concourse and cannot see her anywhere. And she said, "This woman was very tall. I'm very tall." She was also stood out like a sore thumb because of how she was dressed. So I don't know where she could have gone in that time because I wasn't gone for more than 2 minutes, and she also walked very, very slowly. So she's confused. She looks at the woman who's sitting at the next chair over and she says, "Excuse me, did you see where this woman that was sitting here just went?" The woman looks at her strangely and says, "What woman?" And she says, "She's dressed like a movie star. She was just sitting right here." And the woman said, "I'm sorry, I wasn't paying any attention." So then she looks at the man who's sitting on the other side of this chair and she says, "Excuse me, did you see where the woman who was just sitting here got up to go?" And he looks at her very strangely and he says, "There was nobody sitting there." She said at this point she genuinely believed that both of those people were just in their own worlds and not paying attention, and she did not believe that this woman just disappeared into thin air. So she says, "Okay, never mind, thank you." And she goes back to the coffee shop and she brings it back, and the barista's like, "What happened? Didn't she like it?" She said when he asked that question, she just had this pit in her stomach and she felt so bad that she lost this woman who she felt really needed her help. She was so bothered and concerned about this that she actually ended up going up to the gate agent. And she said that she knows that gate agents at airports are keenly aware of everyone around them for multiple reasons. And the gate agent's this tall man, and she says, "Excuse me, did you see this woman who was sitting right here? She's a very striking woman. She's dressed like a movie star." We walked up to the gate together and we were walking so slowly that we were basically shuffling. And the gate agent just says, "No, I'm sorry, but I'll help you keep an eye out for her." And she says, "Yeah, I just feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like I just was talking to a ghost." But she really did not mean anything by it. She was just kind of thinking out loud, and it was the first analogy that she could come up with. But the gate agent peers over his glasses and he says, "You know, baby, that would be a real possibility for you." She said it was so odd. So she just looked at him and said, "What?" And he said, "You know that, right?" She said it just struck her as so strange, but there was nothing else she could do. The woman was gone, so eventually she just waited out her flight and eventually got in line to board. And that same gate agent ended up being the gate agent who scanned her ticket. He tells him thank you and says, "You know, by the way, I never found that glamorous woman I was telling you about earlier." And he looks at her and he has no sense of recognition in his eyes, and he says, "What woman? Who are you talking about?" He says, "You know, I came up to you and I was asking you to help me keep an eye out for that woman that I was looking for." And he says, "I didn't help you, but thank you for flying X, Y, and Z airline. Have a safe flight." Because the entire experience was so strange, she still can't stop thinking about it. She has never had anything like that happen previously, but she can't help but feeling like she was part of another dimension for a moment, and maybe that gate agent was also part of that dimension, however brief. This experience was followed by another odd physical experience a few weeks later, but did not go into detail. However, she said that she feels like her awareness about the hidden worlds around her are expanding. Who do you think this woman was? Clearly, no one else around her saw this woman. Depending on which platform you're watching this on, she may be in the comments. Let her know if you have questions. She's going to be on her anonymous account, though, she said. If you have a spooky, scary story time that you think nobody would believe, send it in. We would love to hear it. We believe you.
The morgue attendant lifted the sheet and hesitated. "You don't have to do this," the attendant said gently. He'd seen it many times. People often couldn't identify their loved ones. It was simply too sad, especially when they looked like this. Daniel shook his head, his hands trembling. "I do have to. I can do it." The sheet was pulled back. The morgue attendant watched Daniel as his eyes roamed all over the corpse. He wouldn't be able to identify a face after what happened to her, but he could through other things, birthmarks, body shape, well, other things. Daniel's head fell into his hands. "It's her." His voice cracked and the morgue attendant sighed. It never got easier. Yeah, he said quietly, confirming it again. That's her. That's Sophie. For years afterwards, Daniel's friends and family rallied around him. He was grateful. He needed all the help that he could get. He didn't ever think that he'd get over what happened. His wife had died, and a hiking trip gone wrong. Sophie had gone alone, up in the Lone Wolf Mountains where the trails were treacherous and the falls were high. All it would take is a fall on a slippery stone and straight off the edge. You wouldn't survive a fall like that, and Sophie didn't. Many people didn't even come home from trekking the Lone Wolfs. In fact, a woman just the day before Sophie died had gone missing on the mountains and was never found, still to this day. Daniel remembered seeing a face on the news. Julianne, her name was. Pretty, young. It was all very, very sad. That was until Daniel hopped back on the horse and downloaded the dating apps.
They do.
For years later. It's been years.
How many years?
Well, it just says 4 years later.
Oh, 4.
For years afterwards, but it's at least a couple of years. He went out with his friends and they saw a change in him. After 4 long years, it seemed like he was getting better. I've met someone, boys, he said proudly one evening over a couple of beers. Her name's Elise and she's hot, he said enthusiastically. Her hobbies are reading, dancing and hiking. Daniel gave a lopsided smile. Well, the lightning doesn't strike twice, right? They all laughed lightheartedly. Sometimes you had to make a joke out of the macabre.
Yeah.
When he met Elise in real life, she was even better than he could have imagined. They fell in love fast, and after a few short months, they were moving in together. They were searching for a house that they could buy together, but Daniel wanted to stay where he was. Elise sighed. I don't know, Danny, it's weird. I get strange vibes off this place. Not to mention, this is the house she bought with Sophie. I feel like I'm living in a shadow the whole time, and this place is just full of junk. You said yourself, we can't even get into the basement. I say we move, get rid of the stuff we don't need, and start again. Daniel loved Elise, but sometimes she could be a bit of a pain. He didn't even want to think of the admin, but what Elise wanted, she got. And so they went house hunting. They saw all kinds of houses, apartments, townhouses, bungalows, semis. But eventually, just like Goldilocks, Elise found the perfect one. A standalone red brick house, 3 stories, with honeysuckle climbing the walls. It was beautiful. They wandered the house in awe. It even had a basement. What more could they ask for? The moving process was easier than Elise had anticipated. Daniel organised the whole thing. He'd even sent her off to a spa on the actual moving day. He said he wanted this to be a special time for her. She shouldn't be dealing with stress, particularly if they were going to start a family soon. He really was perfect. However, as soon as they moved in, Elise started to feel the same way as she had done at the old house. The vibes were off. There was something in the air. It was almost like she was being haunted. Then came the noises. The creaks, the moans, the sounds of chains at night as if she was in some kind of cheesy movie. And then, I thought I saw someone last night, Elise said to Daniel over breakfast. Just for a second, Daniel froze. You saw someone? I heard a noise from the basement. I'd had a few glasses of wine and I was feeling brave, so I decided to find out what was going on. You were already in bed asleep. I opened the basement door, walked down the stairs, and I saw the figure of a woman. Her eyes hollow. I don't know what to do. Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't want to hear this. He grabbed her hands. It was a way of trying to reassure her, but Elise did not feel reassured. It's an old house, he said finally. You hear noises from it settling, and it's freaked you out so much that now you're seeing things that aren't even there. She smiled at him, but he could see the worry tucked behind it. Daniel, I think it's Sophie. Excuse me? I think she's haunting us. She doesn't want me hearing. I think she's just trying to tell us this. Daniel put his hand up. Enough, Elise. I love you, but it's unforgivable.
Oh my God.
Elise started to say something else, but she was interrupted by the scrape of Daniel's chair as he stood. Elise, how dare you bring up Sophie like this? Do you not think I've been through enough? I've lost my wife, and now you're seeing a ghost. Give me a break.
Oh, give me a break.
Pale old man!
Give me a Kit Kat.
Give me... Elise watched tears well up in his eyes, and she swore that she'd never bring it up again. But as the days went by, the noises got so much worse. Daniel heard them too. He lay awake, heart racing, but he couldn't deny it. He just had to face up to it. Elise was hearing these noises too, and he couldn't ignore that. Elise, he said one night when she stirred, you're safe. She's not here. It's just the house. Then the knocking started again. 3 slow raps. Measured, almost polite. Elise just felt like Sophie's ghost was trying to give her a message, and she was petrified about what that message might be. She had to admit Daniel was getting cagey. One night, the knocking started again, and this time, Daniel heard it as well. They were lying in bed together when Elise grabbed his arm. That's not the house. Daniel swallowed hard. I'll check. Elise followed him down the stairs. He peered into the doorway to the basement and looked back to Elise. Nothing, look. Elise took one step forward and poked her head into the darkness, and then she felt something smash into her back. Darkness. Elise's eyes flickered open. The first thing she noticed was a tongue, fuzzy and rough. Then came the pain. It seemed like it radiated from every single part of her body. She couldn't see anything at first. Her eyes started to adjust in the darkness, and she could see all the junk they'd stored when they first moved in. That was when she remembered. The basement door. Daniel telling her to look, and then the fall. Had Daniel pushed her? At that moment, the basement door swung open and footsteps came down the stairs. Whoever it was jauntily whistling a merry tune. Daniel's face appeared in front of her. "Hello, gorgeous," he said, and then laughed. "Well, you're not quite gorgeous right now, but given the circumstances, I think I'll let that slide." "Daniel," Elise said warily, "what's going on? Haven't you worked it out yet?" "I'm surprised. You were getting really close." "Sophie's haunting us. There's someone in the house." "I have to admit, Elise, you were becoming quite grating." All of a sudden, a shadow emerged from behind Daniel. Elise gasped. It was Sophie. Daniel was so busy chattering on that he didn't see the spirit lifting a huge hammer above his head. Elise moved, turned her head just at the last second. She felt blood spatter, hit her face and body, and heard the dull thunk of Daniel's head exploding.
Good.
Elise blinked as she took in the sight before her. Daniel's head, although right now looked like the inside of a pumpkin. And Sophie, breathing hard, hammer still in hand. "Sophie, how are you? You're dead." Sophie laughed mirthlessly. "Yeah, I'm not actually." Elise stared at Sophie, mouth agape like a goldfish. "I suppose that this is all quite a shock, so I'll just talk and you listen. You know the backstory. I died from a solo hiking accident, etc, etc, etc. The truth is, I didn't go alone. Well, I thought I did. But as I was on the trail, I turned a corner, and who do I see? Our wonderful husband, Daniel. Stood in the middle of the trail, holding a bloody knife in his hand, covered in blood, grinning at me like a madman. After the shock, he started talking. He'd had enough of me and my jealous ways. Apparently, I was always accusing him of this and that, and he'd had enough, like I was insane. He didn't want to let me go, though. Oh, no divorce for me. He'd come up with another plan. He killed a woman on the trail that morning. Her name was Julianne, he said. He'd stabbed her and smashed her head in with a rock until she was unidentifiable. Then, when they brought her body in, Daniel told the police, the medical examiner, everyone, that it was me. My family friends all thought I was dead, leaving Daniel to frog march me into the basement with a knife at my neck, knowing that he could keep me here, caged up like an animal, forever.
Oh my God.
He wouldn't have to deal with my tirades, my manic moments of accusing him of sleeping with other women. I was at his mercy. It was all going to plan, too, until he realised that he'd left the door to the basement unlocked one night, and you finally saw me. I was about to tell you to call the police, but you ran off screaming the house down about a ghost, and the rest is history. Elise was still staring, her mind a blur. "Sophie, oh my God, I don't know what to say. Let's call the police." "I'll call the police," Sophie said. But then she picked up the bloody hammer and smiled at Elise. "Right after I finished here." "What are you doing?" Elise screamed. "Oh, Daniel wasn't wrong. I do have a problem with jealousy. The women that are buried under these floors, you've no idea. Even I've lost count. And you think you're going to get away with sleeping with my husband this whole time?" Not a chance. You know, now I think about it, maybe Daniel was just trying to stop me from hurting people. He might even be the good guy in this story. Oh well. Sophie raised the hammer, and the last thing Elise heard was a hard, dull thunk.
Oh my
The end.
goodness.
Wait until you hear this story. My heart was jumping out of my chest. A man telling the story said that his daughter, who is 4 years old, was playing in her bedroom on the second story. He says that he was 2 rooms away playing his guitar when all of a sudden he heard her scream, "Daddy, come here into the guest room. I want to show you something." Now, he immediately said that that seemed off because while it was the guest room, she had never referred to it as that before, and neither did anybody else in the family. He also made mention that while she's pretty good at speaking, this was like too clear for a 4-year-old. So he walks down the hall, turns the corner to see what she wants to show him, and what he sees makes his heart sink. He just sees 2 little legs falling out the window, and he lunged and grabbed her by the ankle and stopped her from falling out the second-story window. He pulls her out of the window, and then he's yelling at her, and then he's apologizing, and then he's yelling again and apologizing. He is just frantic and upset. He said once he hugged her a lot and they both calmed down, they had a long talk about why you don't play up in the windows. She had pushed and popped out the screen. And then he goes, "So what did you want to show me?" And she's like, "What?"
And he goes, you said that you wanted to show me something. What did you want to show me? He iterated again. He said, you said, Daddy, I want to show you something in the guest room. And she just keeps saying, no, I didn't. And he's feeling defeated. He's like, you didn't ask me to come and see something in the guest room. And she's just like, no. And once it set in that maybe she wasn't the one who yelled for him, all the hair on the back of his neck stood up. Also, there was nobody else in the house at that time. I gotta know what your thoughts are in the comments. Are we talking some kind of guardian angel or a mimic? Although those are usually negative. Anyway, let me know in the comments. And if you're new here, you gotta follow for more creepy story time.
Let's read another scary story. It had glowing green eyes. Hi, I wanted to share a real experience from my childhood in case you're interested in using it in one of your scary story videos. I've called the story Green Eyes. This happened when I was very young, probably no older than 4. We lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment. My bedroom was right off the entrance hallway, and my parents slept in the living room because it was the only other space in the apartment. When I was little, if I ever got scared or had a nightmare, I would always shout, "Dad, help," at the top of my lungs. That was my automatic reaction every time I was frightened. One night, for no reason at all, I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. I've always been a good sleeper, so this was unusual for me. The moment I woke up, I felt an instant sense of unease in the room. It felt like the air had changed. A cold shiver went through my body, and I felt this overwhelming fear before I saw anything. Slowly, I opened my eyes. My bed was against one side of the room, and across from it were my shelves and toys. When I looked across the room, I saw 2 glowing green eyes staring directly at me from the darkness. I remember being completely frozen. Even though my instinct as a child was to always scream for my dad, something inside me told me not to make a sound. I had this strong feeling that if I called for help, whatever was there might come closer or attack me. So I shut my eyes immediately and pulled the blanket over my head. I want to stress that I was fully awake. This didn't feel like a dream or a nightmare. I remember being aware of everything around me and felt completely conscious. Eventually, somehow, I managed to fall back asleep. The next morning, I told my mom what I had seen, but she thought it must have been a nightmare or my imagination. But it never felt like a dream to me. I can still clearly remember those glowing green eyes staring at me from across the room. Over the years, I've only told 1 or 2 people about this experience. Even now, it still feels very real and unsettling to think about. A few times since then, I've felt that strange sensation, like when a room suddenly feels cold and a shiver runs through your body for no obvious reason. I've never been able to explain what I saw that night. So if anybody knows what kind of creature this might have been, I would love to know. Thank you so much, Anna, for submitting this story. I don't know if I know of a cryptid that matches this description perfectly, but I will say that this sounds like shadow people or the black-eyed children to me. Although they don't have green eyes, they are known to appear in bedrooms as dark shadows with reflective or bright eyes, and people will often report waking up with that sudden sense of intense fear before seeing the figure. And I think what really creeps me out too is, like, had this been some sort of like reflection from like LEDs or like electronics, this would have been something that you would have noted on other nights. Like, you would have known that there were those 2 dots from some sort of electronic system or something, but you were 100% awake, you saw that they were eyes, and you woke up with the feeling of intense dread. Like, that is horrific. Again, thank you so much for sending this story in. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will catch them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
Hello and welcome back to a series of anonymous petty events, the Toxic Tea Party. The series is brought to you by toxicity and ungodly amounts of petty. I read this story on live and you will not be disappointed in any way, shape, or form. You already know what it is. It's here if you want it. Now on to the story. Hi babes, me again. We're going to start this off by saying that I finally learned my last lesson and beat this final boss demon that has been fucking up my life and emotions for the past 2 years. Cheers to that, bitch. He, who from this point forward will be referred to as the medic, is going to have an extremely eventful next few weeks. Oh, I can't wait to tell you. We begin with a cause for the crazy. Important context, this man is currently going through a drug and alcohol court for DWI number 3. After the radio silence between this man and I for a full day, no real reason at this point, just adults with things to do, I get ready for bed last Saturday night until I'm shaken to my core by a video snap from a friend of mine who works security at one of our local country dance bars of none other than Mr. Mediocre Medic himself, wrapped all around some poor girl at this bar that he isn't even supposed to set foot in by the terms of his current court standings. Now, when has that ever stopped a dumbass? So the internal snap happened. I have no warning, no final words, blocked this man on all platforms, and muted texts and calls. From 1 a.m. to 4 a.m., this man called me over 100 times and left me drunken voicemails in which I can clearly hear him driving his truck home from the bar. Sunday, silence, which brings me to today, which was March 2nd, by the way. I let the crazy loose in every almost legal way possible. I started off mild. I made Craigslist ads for free things in our area with his information and phone number, set to inquire by phone call only, and then amped things up a bit and emailed the prosecuting attorney that is handling his case, out of great concern that he wasn't taking his court-ordered restriction seriously and putting his own safety and the safety of others in danger. And bitch, where's the lie? Because you mean to tell me that you've got 3 DWIs and you are still driving home drunk from the bar? Along with the photo and video evidence that I had of him being in the bar the previous Friday and Saturday. I got a lovely thank you email back. I then ordered anonymous spring-loaded confetti dick cannon to his home, set to deliver right before he goes to court, which he has this coming Wednesday, as well as a gallon-sized shipment of elephant shit by mail order, which he's sure to open inside. We need another term for diabolical. It's just not strong enough. I then made a bunk grinder profile with a fake email, but his information and photos, including his phone number with an invitation to text me before deleting the app. He already had several messages before I deleted the app. I used a fake phone number and the TYP website to send the anonymous "tell your partner" text, informing him that he could have contracted syphilis and chlamydia, as well as email his mother all the screenshots that I have of him claiming that he would take a toaster bath and letting her know that I was a concerned friend, hoping that she would get him the help that he needs, all while this man has no idea. He remains blocked and will eternally. I pray he knows not a modicum of peace for as long as he's been fucking with my emotions. Oh, and his birthday is next week. Now listen, this was posted on March 2nd. Therefore, this was a week ago. We find out, as I'm reading this on live, that his birthday is today. Divine timing to read this story on live and it be his birthday. It's just meant to be. That, my friends, is a 10 out of 10. But if you want to go ahead and rate it, and if you feel it's lower, then you can feel that way. I personally think it's a 10 out of 10. So let me know. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least petty, 10 being the most. What do you think? If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I will see y'all at the next episode. Stay petty, friends.
A nurse says that she saw a patient's soul leave the hospital. Story time. Hi, I wanted to share this story with you because it has stayed with me for years. I'm a nurse, and at the time I was working in a trauma center. One night we had a young patient come in by ambulance for a cardiac arrest. She was only 22 years old. From what we were told, she had spent most of her life living in a group home and had very complex medical issues. She was wheelchair bound and non-verbal, meaning that she couldn't speak. When she arrived, the entire team did everything we possibly could to save her. Unfortunately, despite all of our efforts, she didn't make it. After everything settled down, I was sitting at my station finishing up some charting. The room where she had been was down the hall from where I was sitting. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone come out of that room and start moving down the hallway past the nurse's station. At first, I didn't think much of it until I looked up and I completely froze. Standing there right before me was the girl, the same girl that had just passed away. Only this time she was no longer wheelchair bound. She was standing. She was walking. She looked healthy. She looked happy. She was even smiling, almost like a giddy smile, like she was excited. Even down to wearing the same clothes that she had when she came in. She was wearing gray sweatpants and a green t-shirt. There she was standing before me wearing the same exact clothes. She continued to glide right down the hallway, past our nursing stations, and towards the doorway that was at the end of that hall. Then she just simply disappeared. I can't explain what I saw, and I know how crazy it sounds, but in that moment it didn't feel scary at all. It felt peaceful. My honest belief is that what I witnessed was her soul leaving. The girl had spent her entire life in a body that was sick and limited. Seeing her walk out of that room healthy and smiling felt like she was finally free. I have never been able to forget it. I 100% believe her story. I, again, worked in a trauma center for many years, and I have witnessed this myself. You would see patients coming in extremely sick. They unfortunately would pass away, and then multiple times you would see them leaving. But this time they were no longer sick. They weren't attached to their sick bodies. They were healthy. They were happy. Their soul is not sick. Their body is. Their physical body is, not their soul. So they would leave happy. They were able to cross over in a much better state. Which leads to the next most asked question is if you stay wearing the same clothes that you were wearing when you pass away after, like on the afterlife. And I believe so. I think so. So always try to look your best, I guess.
A lot of people don't realize that rest areas can be haunted too. Now, one of the most haunted rest areas in the United States sits between the border of Idaho and Montana on Interstate 90. It's this beautiful rest area that even has individual private stalls. However, it is very creepy. In fact, in 2021, there were 2 students who went out hiking right next to this rest area, and their bodies were found several weeks later. They had apparently committed suicide. And this place is notorious for strange things happening. Now, one story that I heard from this rest area was there was a truck driver, and he pulls in one night, and he thinks it's odd because he notices like there is no vehicles there at the rest area. He's the only one there. So he gets out of his truck and starts heading towards the building to go use the restroom when he sees a person staring out the window. And the person just turns and then just walks away. So he gets inside the building and he finds one of the private stalls and he goes in there and closes the door and everything. And as he sits down, right, about 20, 30 seconds later, he hears, the door jiggling. And someone's trying to get in the door. And he's like, hey, I'm in here. And it stops. And about, another 20, 30 seconds later, it starts again. Someone's trying to get in there. So he pulls his pants up and runs to the door, opens it, looks, there's absolutely no one there. He goes outside to the rest area. There's no cars there yet. And he looks around the entire parking lot. No one's outside. Well, he sits in his truck and waits until someone else comes. And it happens to be another truck driver. And he sees this truck driver get out of his vehicle. He goes inside. And about a couple minutes later, this truck driver comes running out with a scared look on his face. So he waves this truck driver over to his truck. And he's like, hey, did you have something weird happen to you in there? And the guy's like, I'm leaving. I was in the bathroom and there was a woman standing in the mirror, but she wasn't in the bathroom. So he, gets in his truck. This guy gets in his truck and they get out of there. And that's just one of the many creepy things that happen at this rest area. There's another story about a rest area in Kansas. Now, this guy, he's driving. It starts to get late. He's getting a little tired. And he's on kind of this back rural highway. And he's like, I need to get off the road and get some sleep. So he sees a sign for a rest area. And he pulls in off the interchange and starts driving up to this old-looking rest area from the 50s, 60s kind of look. And he notices all the vehicles that are parked in the parking lot are vehicles from like the 50s and the 60s. And he's like, is there some kind of retro thing going on today or something? So he gets out and he notices there's all these people there, but they're all kind of just wandering around aimlessly, almost like they're, zombies. And they're just kind of, walking really strange. So he goes inside this old building and there's a woman in there and she's turned around. And he goes up to this woman, he taps her on the back and he says, is there like some kind of retro thing going on in town? She turns around and that's when he sees that she has no eyes. And he's freaked out at this point. He runs out, gets in his car and starts driving as fast as he can. And as he's leaving the interchange, his tire gets damaged on the curve. And a couple miles down the road, he ends up having to pull over and call a tow truck. Now, the tow truck comes, and they get him all hooked up to the truck. The tow truck driver's like, where did this happen at? And he goes, you know, at the rest area a couple miles back. And the truck driver the tow truck driver looks at him and is like, there is no rest area around here for 80 miles. So I don't know what you're talking about. And so after he gets his vehicle fixed, he drives back to this rest area, except where the rest area should have been, it was just a big open field, and it looked like something had been there before, but it was torn down. And these are some of the creepy stories at rest areas across the United States.
Let's read a scary story that was sent to us. My dad built our childhood home in 2005 on a massive 45-acre property that had been passed down through my mom's side of the family for generations. The land itself always felt odd, quiet in a way that felt watchful, especially at night. I was only 4 years old when construction began, so I don't remember much of the building process. But my dad used to say the house was special. He never explained what he meant. Whenever I asked, he'd brush it off with a tight smile and say, "I'll tell you one day." There was always something in his tone that made me stop asking. One evening when I was about 10 or 11, we were sitting together in the living room. The house was quiet except for the TV humming softly in the background. During a commercial break, I asked him again what he meant when he said the house was special. This time, he didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the screen, then reached for the remote and paused the TV. The room went eerily silent. He took a slow breath and sat there for a moment like he was deciding whether or not he should tell me at all. Then he started. Near the very end of construction, my dad was in the house alone, finishing work on the windows in the master bedroom. My mom was outside in the yard, nowhere near the house. It was around 8:30 p.m. in June, the kind of dusk where the shadows stretch too long, and the light fades unevenly, leaving certain corners of a room darker than they should be. The house was mostly finished but still empty. No furniture, no sounds, just him, his tools, and the quiet. His back was turned towards the staircase when he suddenly heard a sharp metallic sound, like a single nail hitting the hardwood floor behind him. As he began to turn around, a box full of nails came crashing down from the top of the stairs, spilling violently across the floor as if someone had thrown it. He froze. After a long moment, he slowly approached the staircase. There was no one there. No movement, no explanation. My mom was still outside, and there was nothing upstairs that could have knocked the box over. He told me he never questioned it, never spoke about it, never acknowledged it out loud. He just let it exist. And the way he looked at me when he finished telling me that story made it clear. Whatever happened that night, he didn't want to understand it any further. This happened a few years later when I was about 12 years old. My sister and I had the 2 bedrooms upstairs. She was only 6 and hated sleeping alone, so she often climbed into bed with me. That night was no different. I turned on Nickelodeon, letting the familiar sounds and soft glow fill the room as I tried to relax enough to sleep. She fell asleep almost instantly. My 2 dogs were curled up at the foot of my bed, their presence usually comforting, but that night the air felt heavy and wrong, like something unseen had settled into the house. I couldn't get comfortable. I tossed and turned, my body restless, my chest tight with a sense of unease I couldn't explain. Eventually, I settled on my side, facing away from the bedroom door. The door was open, leading into a long, narrow hallway that was completely dark. Not just unlit, dark. The kind of darkness that feels thick, like it's waiting. That's when the dogs began to growl. At first, it was low and hesitant. I nudged them with my feet and whispered for them to hush. They stopped. A moment later, they growled again, louder this time. Annoyed and half asleep, I sat up slightly and told them to be quiet without even looking toward the door. They stopped again. 5 minutes passed. The silence stretched. Then both dogs snapped upright at the same time. Their growls turned deep and aggressive, vibrating through the mattress. The hair along their backs stood straight up. I had never heard fear in an animal's voice like that before. It wasn't warning, it was terror. I sat up fully, ready to kick them out of my room. Instead, I looked toward the doorway. Standing there was an old woman. She was halfway inside my room, halfway in the dark hallway, like she was caught between entering and retreating. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost glowing against the darkness. She wore old-fashioned clothing, something out of the 1940s, like a soldier's wife pulled straight from an old photograph. She was staring directly at me, and she was smiling. Not warm, not kind. A slow, deliberate smile that felt like she knew exactly what she was doing, and that she had been waiting for me to look. My dogs continued to growl, bodies rigid, eyes locked on her. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might give me away.
Questions flooded my mind. How long has she been standing there? Was she already watching me before the dogs noticed? I rubbed my eyes. I blinked. She didn't disappear. And that's when the thought hit me. A cold, horrifying realization that makes my stomach drop to this day. If my dogs hadn't growled, if I hadn't listened to them, if I hadn't sat up when I did, would she have stepped fully into my room? Would she have came closer while my back was turned? The idea that she was only halfway in, paused, waiting, terrifies me more than seeing her at all. Desperate, I turned away for just a second to shake my sister awake. When I looked back toward the doorway, the hallway was empty. She was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I laid there frozen, staring into the dark hallway, convinced that if I looked away for even a moment, she would return, closer this time. I watched the darkness until the sun finally rose and filled my room with light. My parents told me I must have dreamt it. I'm 24 years old now, and I remember every detail with terrifying clarity. That night is the reason I never sleep with my door open. Whatever waits in the darkness of the hallways can stay there, on the other side of a closed door. Okay, I have to sleep with my door open because I have animals, and that just really scares me. Considering I do sleep with my door open, I cannot sleep with my back towards the door because I feel like somebody's watching me in the doorway. So I have to sleep facing the door. That way I can just kind of like open my eye a little bit and look around, see if anybody's there. Nobody's there, close my eyes and go back to bed. Anyway, that story is terrifying. That's why I turned the freaking light on. When y'all see this light on, I'm scared. Because I see so many comments of people being like, how do you not get scared? I get scared. Let us know if you sleep with the door open or closed.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
I believe what we are going through in life has nothing to do with the spiritual world, but sometimes our children are the ones to see what we cannot see. I see reasons I'll be changing people's names, and let's get into it. So one night, as John and Alba were sleeping in their room, their smallest daughter ran into the room, screaming and crying that she would not sleep ever again in that room with her sister. And of course, John and Alba are like, what are you talking about? What's wrong with you? It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. What's going on? And she kept saying, there's someone in the room with us. There's someone in the room with us. And Alba's trying to relax her and tell her, no, honey, there's nobody in the room with you besides your sister. She's like, no, there's a woman in the room with us, and she won't let me sleep. According to John and Alba, their youngest daughter who slept at the top bunk said that she saw an old woman creep out of the closet, bent over, looking like she just got out of the shower. Now, mind you, this is a 6-year-old trying to describe what she's seeing. She says she saw this old lady bent over with wet black hair walk over slowly to her older sister who slept at the bottom bunk and whisper things to her face. Now, of course, the little girl couldn't see because she was too afraid to look over the edge to see what the old lady was doing. But she said that she could see from where the old lady was bending into the bed that she was trying to get Melissa's attention. Now, the little girl says that the old lady kept whispering things to her sister that were mean. Now, those mean things were, you're ugly, you're fat, you will never be nothing, you're ugly, you're fat, repetitively. Now, the little girl says that the old lady started pacing back and forth in the room from the closet to the bed, from the closet to the bed, from the closet to the bed, just staring at her older sister until she finally went back into the closet. Now, that's when she took the opportunity to run out of the room and get to her parents' room where John and Alba were. Now, when John and Alba heard this, of course, they were alarmed. They ran into the room to see if there was really an old lady, but all they found was the floor wet. Now, of course, Alba turns over to her youngest daughter and says, what did you wet the floor with? And she says, no, Mom, that water is not my water. That's the old lady's water. So, of course, it trailed back to the closet. So John went into the closet. There was nobody there, no secret room, no nothing. You know, most people would think maybe there's a secret room, maybe there's a third room that you don't know about. But according to them, there was no secret room in that closet. The walls were solid. It just trailed back to the closet. They didn't know what it was. So she says that they had no choice but to just leave it as it was. And when they woke up, Melissa said she didn't remember anything. She didn't feel anything. She didn't see anything. And that she doesn't understand what her younger sister is talking about because she was sleeping fine in her bed. There's nothing going on. So Alba says that weeks later, after that incident, is when it all made sense. And what she found out was that her oldest daughter, Melissa, was being bullied in school. And these bullies were repeating the same thing that her youngest daughter said the old hag basically was saying to Melissa as she was sleeping. So to John and Alba,
They believe that these bullies had possibly manifested this old hag, this hate towards their daughter that manifested this old hag to basically haunt their daughter. And who ended up being haunted was the youngest daughter because she's the one who witnessed it, not Melissa. So what do you guys think that was? Do you guys really believe that maybe possibly the bullies manifested this old hag towards Melissa? Or do you guys think that was something else?
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any scary stories, paranormal encounters, or ghost stories that you'd like to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. This story isn't mine, it's my mom's, and it happened to her when she was a little girl. She told me this story years ago, and even now she still gets chills when she talks about it. When my mom was young, she lived with my grandma and her siblings in a very small town in Mexico. Her family didn't have much money at the time, so the house they lived in was, honestly, falling apart. The walls were old and cracked, the floor creaked constantly, and parts of the house always felt cold, no matter how hot it was outside. My mom always said the house had a strange feeling to it, like it had been there far too long. Inside the house, there was a living room that faced directly toward the bathroom. Because the family was big and space was limited, my grandpa eventually turned that living room into another bedroom. So instead of couches, there were beds lined up in the room where the kids slept. One night, when my mom was about 5 or 6 years old, she suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. She didn't know what time it was exactly, but she remembers the sky outside still being dark. The whole house was quiet. She turned her head and looked beside her. Her brother, my uncle, was asleep in the bed next to her. Everything seemed normal, but then she noticed something strange. Across the room, the bathroom door was open. Normally, that wouldn't have been unusual, except my mom said that the darkness inside the bathroom looked different. It looked deeper than it should have been, almost like the room was darker than the rest of the house. She stared at the doorway for a few seconds, squinting into the darkness, trying to figure out what she was seeing. At first she thought maybe her eyes were just playing tricks on her because she had just woken up. But the longer she looked, the more it felt like something was inside the bathroom. She turned to her brother and whispered his name, trying to wake him up, but he didn't respond. So she turned back towards the bathroom, and that's when she saw it. Standing in the doorway were people. Not just one or two. There were several figures slowly walking out of the bathroom as if they were coming from somewhere deep inside the house. Each one of them was holding a lit candle. The candles flickered softly, casting dim orange light across their faces. My mom said that she immediately recognized some of them. They looked like people from the town, neighbors, familiar faces she had seen before walking around during the day, but something about them felt wrong. Their expressions were completely blank, and when they spoke, they weren't speaking normally. They were chanting, a quiet, low song that echoed softly throughout the room. My mom couldn't understand the words they were saying. She was only 5 years old, and the language sounded strange, almost like a prayer mixed with something else. The people with candles slowly walked across the room, one by one, as if they were part of some kind of procession. The candlelight flickered across the walls as they passed, making shadows stretch and twist across the old, cracked ceiling. My mom sat frozen on her bed, watching them. She didn't move. She didn't even breathe. She said the whole scene felt unreal, like she was watching something that wasn't meant for her to see. As more and more people appeared, the chanting grew louder. And that's when fear finally hit her, and she started crying, loudly. She began calling for my grandma from the other room. The moment my grandma rushed into the bedroom and turned on the light, everything vanished. The room was completely empty. No candles, no chanting, no people. Just the quiet bedroom and the old bathroom door across the room. My grandma tried to calm her down, telling her that it was probably just a dream, but the strange part is, it didn't stop there. For months, my mom kept waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the same thing. The bathroom door would be open, the candle procession would appear again. All the same people, every time, all the same chanting, all walking slowly across the room. And every time, my mom would call out for my grandma. And every time, the moment my grandma entered the room and turned on the light, everything would disappear. Eventually, my grandma became so concerned that she asked a pastor from the town to come and visit the house. When the pastor arrived, he walked through every room, praying and blessing the house. He sprinkled holy water on the walls, the doors, and especially around the bathroom. After that day, my mom never saw the candle procession again. But to this day, she still wonders about something. Why were those people walking around the room, and where were they coming from in the first place? Because the bathroom in that old house only ever had one door.
We had a recent Mothman sighting, and this one is a little concerning. It just happened this past month near Columbia, South Carolina. Now, there was this couple who was driving late at night around 10:30 p.m. As they're going down this highway, they said they noticed something in the road. At first, it appeared like a feral hog, but as they got closer to this thing, they said it resembled a person crouched down. And all of a sudden, it stood up, and it looked like a man that had these very long wings. It looks up to the sky, and it reaches his hands up, and then it took off into the air. This couple then goes over to this area where they seen this thing take off, and they noticed that the area was filled with like static electricity, and it was very warm. There were tremendous amounts of heat in this specific area where this thing took off. And afterwards, they began to feel very nauseous and sick, as if they had encountered something that was some type of chemical. So what do you think? What does the Mothman sighting in South Carolina mean?
In honor of Women's History Month, I'm doing 31 Days of Women in Horror. Today we're starting off with one of the most iconic horror performances of all time, Linda Blair. In 1973, Linda Blair shocked audiences around the world when she played Regan McNeil in The Exorcist. Her terrifying performance as a young girl possessed by a demon became one of the most famous horror roles in history. At 14 years old, she was nominated for an Academy Award. Then in 1977, she returned to The Exorcist in Exorcist II in The Heretic. But Linda Blair's career did not stop there. She has an extensive horror resume. In 1978, she starred in the supernatural TV film Stranger in Our House. It was also known as Summer of Fear as it was based on a novel. In 1981, she played in Hell Night, which became a cult classic for slasher fans. Throughout the 80s and 90s, she appeared in a wide range of horror films, including Witchery, Grotesque, and Dead Sleep. Then in 1990, she had some fun playing in a horror comedy parody called Repossessed. She also played in Bad Blood, Bedroom Eyes, The Chilling, Sorceresses, and so many more. I can't even list them all. Decades after terrifying audiences as Regan Blair, she came back in The Exorcist Believer, and next year she's going to be performing in Exorcist Deceiver. For over 50 years, Regan McNeil is one of the most terrifying characters ever played in horror history. Come back tomorrow for 31 Days of Women in Horror for Women's History Month.
About strange encounters, I got a spooky scary story time submission from someone named Amber who detailed a story called The Signal People, and she basically described her experience dating this man who lived out of state, who she met at her job, and he ended up being very strange. I'm getting like covert secret government agent vibes. I could be wrong. Wild story. I could not fit it into one part on here though. The story ended up being like almost 20 minutes long. Normally the spooky scary story times are like between 3 and 5 minutes, I would say. So this one was like very long. So I put it on my video app channel, you know, the one that spells YOUTUBE. I had to think about how to spell it for a second. It's the most recent upload. It is part of a compilation of stories, but I deliberately put it at the beginning of the newest episode. So if you've already heard all the other stories and you just want to hear that one, that's where it is. This is what the cover of that episode looks like. Like I said, it's the most recent upload on my channel. Same username there. It's at Ashley Inc. But that's what I'm going to be doing from now on with the longer stories instead of breaking them into parts and having people inevitably get mad at me. So if you want to hear the Signal People, go there and check it out. Thank you. Love you.
Okay, I'm going to do an extended version of this on our Patreon. This is an ET group that is medium to darker range. They're not there to abduct, but they surveil. It's like a surveillance. They come in, they take the shape of an orb, and then turn into a physical being, but that physical being is very see-through, translucent. They can make themselves more physical and more dense when needed. That reaction of the dog says it all. They should not be in this home. And this is no different than if your neighbor is hopping your fence without asking, opening your back window and climbing into your home without asking. This is no different than someone coming into your space without asking. They aren't there to abduct, but they are there to inquisitive, survey. What are we doing? What are humans doing? How are they living? Looking through things. It's deeply inappropriate. How we protect ourselves from this is different for everyone, and it depends on the alien group. And in a situation like this, it depends on the family, and the family has to be willing to do the work to set up that protection. They have to believe that it's actually happening. The dog tells us everything. When I do work like this, it's very specific to the family and to the alien group. It's different every time. I would put money on it. They have had weird dreams, other weird experiences that are subtle, like, did that really happen? Or just feeling off or feeling strange. That's this. Because this is not the first time this thing has come through their home. And there's 2 of them, by the way. There's 2 that come through. We just saw 1. Or I just saw 1. Maybe you guys saw more. This is not the same as an orb. This is not the same as a human that passes and the spirit comes back to visit or is haunting or whatever it's doing. That is not this. Can they look the same? Can they look similar? Sure, this is a perfect example. But this is where we need to use our intuition to understand the difference. This is an alien group surveying its humans and how they are living. If nothing more, to support that dog, so the dog is not feeling uncomfortable in its own space. And so the dog feels like it has some sense of ownership of its own space.
You've probably seen this guy. If you don't recognize this picture, you probably recognize this picture. He is, as we speak, getting ready to go to trial. Let's talk about why. Daniel Larson was born in 1998 into a really bad and sad home. He was severely neglected as a child, and as a result was taken away from his parents and put into the care of his grandmother. There's a video online of when Daniel was only 14 years old and attending Tennyson Center for Children, which has been described to be a treatment center for emotionally and crisis-affected children. He started going to that treatment center after he moved to Denver, Colorado to live with his grandmother. Around this time as well, he was diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and bipolar disorder, and because of that, he needed a little bit of extra help figuring out how to navigate through life. His grandma was more than willing to be the person that Daniel needed, but unfortunately, she lost her battle to cancer in 2019. At that treatment center, which was not his first, he showed up really angry and unsure of the world and of himself, but after a year and a half of living there and then moving in with his grandmother, there was a lot of improvement in Daniel. But when he lost her, I can imagine that felt like he was taking 10 steps backward. At that Tennyson Center, Daniel met a man called Bob Proctor, who he really bonded with. Bob also got to know Daniel's grandmother. So after he heard about her passing, he kind of stepped up to be that support system for Daniel because he knew that he would need it. And even though Daniel knew that there was something different about him, he found a passion in singing and acting, and he really wanted to give it a real shot. That treatment center and the time that he spent with his grandmother gave him the confidence that he needed to believe in himself. He starts making music, and then he starts posting on social media, on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, etc., and his videos started getting a lot of traction, a lot of attention, and his following started to grow a lot. He also started posting daily vlogs, doing lives, posting videos of him just talking, in addition to singing and doing music. And because of his quirky, unique personality, people on the internet really started to hype him up and encourage him. His following grew, his confidence grew, and all of a sudden he started talking about how he was finding a lot of success in the music industry. And he said that he started hearing a lot from different label companies that wanted to sign him, and because he had a pretty big following. By the way, he made new TikTok accounts all the time. There were a ton of them. A lot of them don't exist anymore, but he would get banned and then he would just make a different account. But anyway, point being, he started acting like he was famous. He loved it. He felt like it. Whether his comment section was filled with people who were actually his fans, who actually wanted the best for him, or people who only had bad intentions, is kind of up for you to decide. But point being, he was getting a lot of attention, and Daniel started making TikToks talking about about the most random things. For example, he announced that he was going to be running for president, promising things that he would do. He would often talk about controversial topics, interesting online claims, and he would also record himself and post videos online of him having odd interactions in public and talking to people in public that would raise a lot of concern from his followers that were watching. And as you can imagine, people on the internet saw this as an open invitation basically to come in and criticize him without holding back. So while you did have those people who were supporting him, looking out for him, there were just as many people, if not more, with clear bad intentions. Daniel also very, very often talked about this unhealthy obsession that he had with Grace VanderWaal, an American singer-songwriter who won America's Got Talent. However, this was one of the first things that sent major alarm bells to people, given the things that he would say about Grace at times, more oftentimes than not towards the end, were so graphic in nature. And when he started talking about Grace in that way, she was only 16 years old. In one of his videos, Daniel claimed that him and Grace were in a relationship. I think in one he said that they were getting married and that she was having his babies. I think he also said at one point, although that obviously was not the case. But there is a chance that Daniel could have been convinced that what he was saying was true, because when he's talking about it, if you listen to him, he seems so sure of what he's saying, even if the things that he was saying could not be any further away from the truth. And when people started to notice how quick Daniel was to believe anything that he was told, they started taking advantage of that for their own entertainment, because he would think that everything that he read was true and he would take any and every comment as his reality. So very constantly, people would make fake accounts of either Grace VanderWaal or fake record label companies or fake management companies. They would reach out to Daniel pretending to be real, only to feed into what already felt like such an unstable state of mind, which only led to those people on the internet to push it one step further. Daniel Larson's popularity very quickly became negative, but a big turning point of it was in November of 2020 when Daniel's Pinterest account and search history was leaked. And on there were a lot of disturbing images of girls who were not of legal age, a lot of pictures under a pin titled Girl Crushes, and another pin that had the map of the age of consent in different states. When people also looked at his liked and reposted videos on TikTok, they noticed that it was a lot of videos and pictures of children disturbing in nature and uncomfortable to any normal person. Shortly after that, Daniel would post a video addressing this, saying that it was his Pinterest account, that the allegations online in regards to himself and children were very true, and saying that he had an attraction to young kids. He was also apologizing for it. Later on though, however, he would take everything back and he would say that his social media accounts were hacked and that the weird behavior was not him. Some people believed him, of course, a lot of others did not. Throughout this time, by the way, it's believed that Daniel was living in group homes, still in contact with Bob Proctor, who he referred to be his mentor, but nothing in his life was stable. Keep in mind that he was struggling with autism, ADHD, and bipolar disorder. He is also believed, in the opinion of some doctors who treated him, that he possibly also struggled with schizophrenia because of several occasions where he reportedly had really bad delusions, causing him to have delusional ideas of his own, but also making him more vulnerable to believe anything that anyone said to him, no matter how crazy things sounded. Also, I'm obviously not saying anything negative about people who struggle with similar things. I'm just saying that in Daniel's case, without the proper medication and treatment and care, on top of already being a target for people of the internet, that all combined, it did not help Daniel's mental health, which in result only made his behavior and his actions worse. In videos, Daniel started to behave very erratically. He would have breakdowns where he was either really angry or he was crying. He would damage walls by kicking and banging his head against them. He would talk about children and girls in ways that are not at all acceptable in any way, shape, or form. He also once showed himself live wearing nothing on his bottom half, like quite literally nothing. That got his account banned, but he created a new TikTok account the same day. He would also talk about any and every controversial topic that you can think of, saying things that did not really make sense, all while still being in this fake relationship in his head with Grace VanderWaal. He would believe messages of people that would message him saying that they were management companies and or record label companies. Fake numbers of people pretending to be children would also text Daniel, trying to see if he would fall for it and say incriminating things under the perception that they were children, and he would every single time. He would talk about fighting people, lighting fireworks inside of buildings, and his plans to severely damage and destroy public property with people inside just to see what would happen. It was not good. And then around 2021, Daniel Larson was left homeless, only making things go downhill even faster. He became known for dining and dashing. He would go to restaurants such as Cheesecake Factory and order multiple dishes, and then he would get on live on social media and ask his followers to send him money in order to pay for his meals. When he was sent money, he would pay, but when he wasn't, he couldn't afford to, so he would just leave. And that left him to be banned of so many restaurants. Also, because he had nowhere to live, he also started sleeping in public bathrooms like Planet Fitness bathrooms and casino bathrooms. In one video, he says that he was banned by over 30 Planet Fitnesses for sleeping in their bathrooms. He was also banned from a ton of casinos. And he was just constantly getting kicked out of places. Then he would record himself getting kicked out, yelling at people, people yelling at him. He would also make videos declaring war, saying that he was going to start a war and talking about all the things that he was planning on doing to do so. There was really not a single thing in Daniel's life that was stable, and that showed. And it is not surprising to know that a lot of people saw Daniel as someone who was quite literally losing his mind in front of all the people on social media to watch. It also comes to no one's surprise that Daniel's behavior led to him getting in trouble with law enforcement on a number of times. He was arrested for various things, including attempt to unlawfully damage and destroy a building and other real and personal property such as university campuses, courthouses, nonprofit centers, the White House, FBI headquarters, evasion of justice after not showing up to court, offenses of crimes of violence. And then in 2024, he was charged with 7 federal charges. Those were all in relations to the things that he was claiming he was going to do to bring harm to others. And the path that he was going down, also specifically his search history on the internet, showed that he did have intentions to do these things. Whether or not he would or wouldn't have, we will not know, thankfully. So he was arrested and he was ordered to see a doctor for his mental health. The doctor confirming many things that dated back to Daniel's childhood. For example, histories of head injuries and trauma. A report states that his mother reported that Daniel had, quote, non-accidental head injury around the age of 3 weeks and a seizure around 5 months, end quote. Also states that his mother hit him with a hammer at 8 years old, that Daniel demonstrated executive dysfunction concerns at the age of 12 and 13, and that in the past he had been hospitalized after he hit his head and broke multiple holes in the walls after he felt overwhelmed. All the things that Daniel struggled with as a child carried on into his adulthood. And the doctor also stated that Daniel struggled with delusional beliefs that were only made worse and encouraged by the people on the internet who he believed were his fans. Because of that, Daniel was not fit to stand trial, and he was instead advised to continue taking antipsychotic medication and treatment at a medical center. The competency question on whether or not he was able to stand trial has been dragging on for almost 2 years. He most recently had court hearings on January 22nd and February 3rd of 2026 to determine this. And after months of psychiatric evaluations and testimonies from multiple psychiatrists, a judge has very recently ruled that Daniel Larson is competent to proceed in his federal criminal case. A trial date has been set for April 20th of 2026. I think that every single aspect of this case is so sad. I think the things that he did and said are really disturbing and really scary. But I also think that he needs so much help that he did not get. I'm going to be looking out for this trial, so yeah. But that's it for me today. Also, my eyes, I feel like, have been so red the last few videos. I have the world's most sensitive eyes, and they get red if I don't blink often enough. So I'm not crying, even though it looks like it. My eyes are just really sensitive. Anyway, hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.